And a very happy new year to all of our attendees. Welcome to the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management's webinar for today, Wednesday, the 12th of January. It's midday in the UK. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the UAE, 3 o'clock in Riyadh. It's an international audience we have today. We're promulgated as part of the Navigating Turbulent Times series of webinars by the IWFM. And today's, making sure you're on the right webinar, is about customer experience management. So we're going to be looking at specifically measurement and benchmarking in FM. This is the second of 3 presentations by this working group as part of IWFM. We're going to be looking at what is the CEWG, which is yet another good abbreviation. What are our findings after about just coming up to 2 years of research and putting things together? All is revealed along with the publication today of part 2 of the Good Practice Guide. So without further ado, we're going to move on to introducing this running schedule. And for today's rundown, IWFM is the host entity. Part 1, for your delectation in the first 20 minutes, is what is CX and CRM. For those of you with pens and pads at the ready, there will be a plethora of abbreviations which you can Google, or we hope to, by the end of it, explain to you so that you'll have a full and deeper understanding than most of us had when we started this journey about 2 years ago. So introducing you to the Good Practice Guide Part 2, then Chiswick Park for our international participants. It is a famous business centre park in the west side of London, and we'll be hearing more about that, which is a case study for customer experience. And it was a contender in the Impact Awards last year. Then we go on to a straw poll. This is very much, we want to have something based as an interactive webinar. It's not just a question of so-called experts talking to you or down at you. This is something for you to participate. There are 3 straw polls throughout the entire presentation. And then there's a survey at the end for you to declare how well you think we've done as a team to whet your interest and inspire you to get more involved or to get more out of your CRM systems. So straw poll number 1 is firstly, it's a leveler for what level are you at? Then we've got a virtual sofa for our first 2 guests, which Maud Santa Maria, who is our moderator for the day, will be introducing to you shortly. Part 2 is which tools do you use for the customer experience measurement? Second virtual sofa sees me back again as a member of the working group with a colleague, Andy Kelly. Straw poll number 3, how are we doing? Then there's a Q&A session. So the last quadrant of our particular hour will be recording this event all the way through. You can watch it at a later date. It will be published on YouTube. But for the moment, it's going out live across the world. And there's a Q&A session where you can send in your messages. You'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a function for Q&A. So please, at any one stage, there'll be a couple of reminders as we go through the program for you to be able to submit your questions. And we've got a back office team who are going to collate them and get them ready for that last session. Then a summary, upcoming events and survey. So that's it. It's a busy session. Let's crack on through. And as we said, the IWFM is the sponsor. And what we want to be able to do is to reinforce and justify why we are holding this survey of your particular opinions and why we're delivering this Good Practice Guide in the first place. So this comes under the vision and in particular the mission of IWFM, which are laid out here. There's obviously more details supplied at IWFM's website, iwfm.org.uk, but in particular, why is it that the working group is focused on customer experience? There are 4 strategic aims that IWFM has published. One of which is to be a recognized trusted voice. The other part is to be a destination for research, information and debate, which is very much of what we're trying to achieve today. Then to get a vibrant, accessible and engaged community. So we're reaching out to people who are members of IWFM, members of the wider FM community, members of a customer relationship management sector, or people who just realize that this is a topic they don't know much about and they'd like to think about it. The 4th one is the first choice development for individuals and organizations. So I'm going to hand over, you've heard enough from me, I'm going to the delightful Maud Santa Maria. She's Workplace Experience Director for Mace's Operate business in London. And she has joined Mace in 2020 and she is our star of staging screen. I'm delighted to introduce and say Happy New Year to Maud Santa Maria. Over to you, Maud.
Thank you, David. Happy New Year to everyone. Always a great intro as well. So I like that. Thank you. So thank you for joining. And I think, without further ado, we wanted to kind of show you what we're launching today and what the webinar is about, which is our working guide on customer experience. So David, if you want to change slide. So we're effectively talking about our group and going to show you the customer experience measurement guide that we've done. We're not going to go through each of the page. I think this is something we would love you to do obviously at the end of the webinar, and it is quite a comprehensive guide with quite a lot of pages. Therefore, we'd rather have this at the end. But we just wanted to highlight maybe a couple of pages of the guide that we want to highlight, and that will be references on the panel. So here's what it looks like. As David mentioned, we have, as the working group, spent over 2 years to creating the guide. This is non-exhaustive, and it's definitely not the last bits of it, as it's constantly changing. We know that the pandemic has also shifted or maybe accelerated the expectation of the customers and their behavior. And therefore now, because people want to have that sort of quick and short and ultra personalized customer services, we thought that was realistic to launch it, hopefully at the end of the light of the tunnel of the pandemic. So what you see right now, as I mentioned, it's not necessarily that we're going to go through all of the guide. We're hoping that you will be inspired to read the guide at the end of this webinar, but just highlight. So you see, we thought that we will go through the journey of customer experience measurement. So first looking at the why, the how, and the what, as opposed to directly just list all of the tools and methodology that you will have. So right now, this is the page that you will find again on the guide, which is the why. We'll have also highlighted a couple of measurement methodology. We thought that these are the ones that most of the people will recognize their contract upon, their organization that they're working for upon. And although because we have all levels here on within Iwfm with all of the members, we feel that everybody will find the tools that they would recognize and maybe some new ones that they would want to try. We've also looked into the customer journey mapping. We know this is one of our favorite tools within the FM, and yet maybe not completely used. So we really looked into each of the tools you will use on each touch points. And interestingly enough, as we mentioned, this is the guide number 2, and it will be a guide number 3 that is very in more depth into the customer journey mapping. And some other parts which are, as David mentioned, it is about measurement and benchmarking. So we also have a huge set of standards, certification, awards that we believe are relevant for our industry, but also outside of our industry. There's a quick nudge on the Iwfm Awards, of course, which you can enter right now for 2022. And we finished kind of the guide based on the benchmarking tools that you can have either within the industry, but actually benchmarking across other industry, as now the customer experience is not just an FM piece, is actually looking at maybe hospitality and other industry that will guide us into delivering that great experience. So hopefully, looking at the guide in very quick overview, you'll be willing to download it later on and hopefully talk to us as well to have some more information. What we'll go through today is not just talk about the guide, but hopefully making sure that you have case study examples, experts from our panel that are telling you how they have measured their customer experience, how they've benchmarked it, and maybe also challenges that we're facing. So if we go to the next slide as well, we'll see that we wanted to try to have a case study that's a bit dynamic as well. So we're launching the video for our case study. It's about Chiswick Park, as we mentioned, Enjoy Work. And we wanted to look at what good looks like, or what best practice in customer experience look like. I'm sure at the end of the video, you will see what we're mentioning. Sorry, the video is still rolling, by the way. Thank you. So I guess, looking at a video like this, you will 100% see that this entices you to work there. You can see that the experience you just got from the glimpse of 2 minutes video of Chiswick Park entices you to say, where is it? Where can I work there? And this is kind of what best practice looks like. It should really speak for itself. The satisfaction event should always be high, and obviously attraction and retention of new customers should be quite high. And I hope you will see that from that video. And if you were lucky enough to have ever been to visit Chiswick Park, enjoy work, you will see this. Today we'll have Carly Gibbs that will join us on the panel. So I'm sure that we will be able to have some questions as well if you require. It is time for our first poll. As David mentioned, we don't want to just talk about the customer measurement. We just want to see who is on the audience with us today. So we're effectively asking you what you think your level of customer experience measurement skills, or what tools you may have used in the past. What's your level? What do you think it is? If you could vote, if you can see the poll on the screen. Let me look at the results. It will help us to start the first panel as well. So I think we have about 80% of you guys that have answers. So we might go to have a quick look at the results. Great. So I think you can all see the results of who is on the call, and I have to say, as the part of the working group on customer experience, we have also tried to establish the guide to help any level of FM that you will have. So hopefully that's exactly what we were hoping to see. If I'll start to introduce the first panel and my first panel guest though, so we can discuss the poll results. it's a good reminder, actually, the slide that I've got in front of me to mention that you can at any time post your questions on the Q&A from Zoom. Hopefully you all know about this, but otherwise it's at the bottom of your screen. Tab Q&A, and you can send your question and we will look at it at the end of the webinar. We'll have some time for that. So without further ado, I will introduce my two panel guests for this first panel discussion. So we have, as I mentioned, Carly Gibbs. Carly is the head of guest experience at Chiswick Park Enjoy Work. Again, I think we all got a message here to say, can we work in your business park? She looked after the guest experience program on the campus, which, as we mentioned, has received the Impact Award, but other awards as well. She's also managing the guest experience host team, looking after all of the building reception, and she has over 6 years experience in the FM industry. And we have also Jamie Mcdonald. Jamie has been the chair of our Iwfm working group since its beginning in 2019. But Jamie is also the vice president of the Institute of Customer Services, and he has over 30 years of experience in the FM industry with an impressive collection of awards, especially on the customer services on his past contract. So welcome, Carly and Jamie. If you want to put your camera on and microphone. Just
Good afternoon.
Here as well. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. I think it's clear to say from your introduction, I have tried to do, but clearly that stays on the screens, that you have what it takes to hopefully answer some of the questions on customer experience. So I've got a couple for you. And first, maybe because we've done that poll and you've seen the results, what do you think, and are they surprising you, those results? Maybe Carly and Jamie.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, good morning, wherever anybody is across the world where we're listening. But it's great to see those results, and we've clearly got a split of experience levels that are joining us. And I think, you know, it's interesting that there's only a small number of people saying, you know, very much they're a star at this. I think we've all got a lot to learn, and although some of us might be using customer experience measurement and benchmarking for a while, we've all got a lot to learn, and it's such a dynamic area as well, that I think we can all learn something. So it's great to see such a split of experience joining us today.
Jamie, what do you think? Surprise?
Indeed, I think there's a real rainbow of responses, isn't there? We've got some real unicorns who are some top achievers. But it's interesting when you get people together and you ask people for some great examples of a great customer experience. They'll talk about First Direct and Qatar Airlines and Waitrose and John Lewis. People rarely talk about FM and workplace, and that's really wrong, because across the UK and globally, our people are doing great things every day. But as an industry, we're not known for it, and I think that's a real travesty. So sessions like this, and I guess also that drive of self-awareness in terms of how we measure activity and celebrate it, there's a huge opportunity there. I think our workplace is full of great experiences. I think sometimes we lack consistency and we don't shout about it enough as well. So whether it's going for awards, or more importantly, it's how we manage and lead our teams, a huge opportunity, but great to see. I think there's about a quarter of people, they're in a good place over this as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and hopefully this is where, you know, the working group and the Iwfm were launching those type of webinar and those type of guides that we launched today is helpful for any levels. So maybe if I start with a couple of questions, one of the first thing, like we mentioned on the guide, and what we would like to do today is why are we talking about measuring the customer experience? You know, why are we doing this measurement? So we've already kind of mentioned the different type of customers that we're going to have, you know, between end user and clients and employees as well, different tools, different methodology already that we've seen when we looked briefly at the guide. So maybe I can ask you, Carly, first, why do you measure guest or customer experience?
Yeah, well, for us, it's probably not much different from any others, but it's really looking at, are we actually doing, and more importantly, achieving what we say we are? It's also about identifying opportunities for development, but also identifying areas to pull back on as well. And it's really for us about measuring to allow us to ensure we're getting the basics right as well. So it's really about that return on investment for us. You would have seen from the video, there's a whole host of things that we do here on our business park. We're not your traditional business park, and we have various events and activities, from giving out ice creams, candy floss, to zip lines that we have going across the park. But for us, we're 21 years old. We are an office-based facility, and we need to continue to innovate and strive forward to lead the way and be extraordinary in what we do. We have many customers, both internal and external, being the companies that are based on the park, our guests, our tenants. We treat them as guests, really thinking about that customer experience. Also our team and members of the public as well. And they all have very different needs and expectations and deliverables. So if we really focus on those companies and why we measure experience there, brands have so much more choice now on where they want to work, how they choose to work in this hybrid, flexible way of working as well. And we need to ensure that we are achieving extraordinary experiences in all that we do, whether it be the facilities and our buildings, across the estates, through our events and services, and our team as well. And we need to do that to ensure that these companies stay with us and grow. The big thing for us is why would we then measure it, is because we want to know before they do. And they make the choices by actually making the choice with their feet and their checkbooks and actually going to move to another place. We want to identify that first. So that's why it's really important for us to really review what we're doing, reflecting back, and then actioning upon those findings as well. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I was going to say a couple of nice little nuggets, so that was quite interesting to see. Go ahead, Carly.
Yeah, I guess it's just looking at, again, from that internal side of things, really looking at our team and measuring their experiences as well, because they're on the ground, they're the heartbeat of what we do. We're nothing without our people. So again, it's measuring those experiences through them. And when you start looking at data, you have data coming at you from every different angle. And we'll talk about that when we talk about how we can measure the experience. But it must be really key to highlight that sometimes, our team and looking internally have so much data and great tools for measuring experience that mustn't be forgotten about that. So there's just some of the key reasons as to why we measure those experiences of what we're offering from all our audiences.
I love it. And I think there is some things that, Jamie, we can pick up on. I definitely heard return on investment. I know this is something that we're going to talk about and the guide has mentioned, because this is what FM, I guess, we are asked a lot about. What's interesting is that you've already defined customer personas or the ones that you're going to measure. So we're going to have your public, because you are a business park and public can join the park. You also have your clients that are paying, the businesses and organization, and you have your employees, which I really love that you mentioned as well. So maybe I can go to Jamie. How would you start measuring the employee experience then?
It's a great question, Maud. Hopefully most people get the fact that the best way and surest way to delight our end customers is to look after our teams. And we'll talk later over some of the tools and some of those processes. I can see in the question Steve's asked about NPS. They're great tools, and I think they work equally well internally and externally. But I guess sometimes it's understanding the depth of that engagement piece. So whether it's event driven, which is some jargon, that means somebody's engaged with a help desk or commissioned a service or used the service and they're asked questions about it, or more experiential in terms of understanding how people think. Often you miss the silent majority, and most people who work on the estate within the workplace, as Carly said, they're fizzing with ideas, feedback, they're not tapped into. So alongside some really good measures to do with effort score, NPS and CSAT, more of that later, we shouldn't underestimate the value of conversations. Everybody who works in our estates and our businesses, they have team meetings, they have one-to-ones, annual appraisals, and they and their boss and their peers talk about their objectives, their goals, their performance. I bet they almost never talk about the role the workplace has in their success. So can you imagine a future where at the end of year reviews, as part of the appraisal process, the boss says to their team and their people, and how much did the workplace impact you this year? What could we do differently next year? That's really unusual. And I think that will begin to unlock people's experience of being a user of the workplace. Clearly, measurement models and mechanisms have a role to play, but there's so much stuff that gets missed by those. So I think if we, as a team of FM professionals, if we can really unlock that with our peers across our organisation, and it's those conversations, the more we can talk about the value, the barriers, the blockers, and the enablement that comes from workplace and FM in terms of the normal review process, there's loads of value there. We can measure it in certain ways and report it in certain ways, but I think most people could easily say, well, actually, if this was different, I could do this. This would really help me. We don't have these conversations. I think most of our leaders are focused on objectives, goals, performance, as opposed to, and could the workplace unlock that? And for me, that's a key driver of employee engagement, really understanding how we can get people to have a shape and a say in their workplace, not just the key outcomes they're tasked with.
Okay, I think there's clearly a role that Iwfm also is there to play and to answer kind of what you've mentioned. And we should actually stop saying just FM. We should say that the workplace and facility management team, which is very encompassing what we do right now. So it's so true. Maybe if I ask, because I know there's a couple of questions that came already, and this is one of the one that we've discussed before. Maybe if we look into this, and we know sometimes how hard it is to convince of a new tools that we want to do, a new methodology, especially if you discuss with a client, and it's not easy when you're already on a contract sometimes. So maybe if I ask you, Carly, because you have different organization that comes as well to the business park, but also new teams effectively. So maybe we can ask, what has been your biggest challenge that you face when you're measuring either employee or the customer experience?
Okay, thank you. Yes, it can always be a big question of, well, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What's the benefit of it? And I think the key things, a couple of key challenges are around really making this relevant. It's got to be relevant to you. There are some fantastic tools out there, and case studies as well as around how people have been measuring the experience factors there. But sometimes they don't just quite connect, and it can be quite difficult to make things feel worthwhile and relevant. So I think that's the key one there, and it's around looking, don't be afraid to look outside your industry. And here at Chiswick Park, we do look at other workplace environments, but we are a little bit different. So we reach out and start looking at the hospitality and the leisure industry as well. We look through to amusements and theme parks as well. How do they measure their experiences? How can we bring some of that into what we do to make it relevant for us? And then you can adapt and adjust what you do. So it really has to be worthwhile. So making it relevant is one key challenge that can come up there. And then considering back to some of the points that Jamie made as well, again, around that engagement, inclusion and transparency, I would say are two key words that stand out and are very much core to some of our values at Chiswick Park. I think if we think back to, some of you might have listened to Simon Sinek and some of his TED Talks that he does in his books around the question of everything starts with why. And so that can come back to it. Why are we measuring guest, team, customer experiences? Do your teams, do your customers really understand why you're measuring things? Do they know how you're going to be measuring it? Do they know actually when they can expect to see some of the results? What are you going to do with the results as well? And then it's around, making sure that it's relevant, but then it's about building that trust as well. And then being transparent, as said, by showing these results, both the good and the not so good, we all have them. And then building upon those actions, get engagement, getting inclusion of showing these are our results, this is our action plan, this is what we're going to do off the back of it, when we're going to do it, and how. So we can start to celebrate those results together. So I'd say very much around some of the challenge that we can look to overcome to make this a little bit easier, making it relevant, thinking about that inclusion and getting everybody involved, and the transparency right the way through.
I like the fact that, thank you, Carly. I like the fact that you both mentioned communication, transparency, either for the customer in general or the employee. So I think that that's quite relevant. We had another question kind of in mind, but I have seen it asked on the Q&A, so I might actually keep it for our Q&A session, so all of our panelists and experts could maybe answer it with maybe Jamie as a pole position. So thank you both, and then we'll have you again on the Q&A later on. Thank you so much, and then we'll go for our thank you. We'll go for our poll number 2, just to make sure that you guys are following us as much as you can. So I don't know if you can all see it now. What we would like to know is, what are the tools and techniques that you guys are using, the guys that are listening, that are using. I like the fact that there is a modes list. It's probably made of rainbow and unicorns, to be fair. That's how I do it. And so that's probably the tools, and looking at what Carly has done and what we've seen on the video, I would say if you give me candy floss, I'll put you at the maximum customer satisfaction I can. So we have put a couple of tools that are well known in the industry or that people may use the most into this poll, and let's see what you guys have said, if we can see the results. If we can already see the results. We should have put others and have an extreme dynamic session and ask for everyone to mention what are their favorite tools. So looking at the results, I think there are some that we all have heard of, or we all do. So benchmarking is always an interesting one, especially when we looked at what Caroline mentioned, to maybe look outside of the FM industry, hospitality, etc. NPS, we have mentioned it from a question, and Jamie mentioned it as well, for sure, and ENPS if you wanted to go on to the employee. But if I start introducing my second panel, maybe we can have a check on what the experts are thinking about those results. So without further ado, I'll introduce to my 2 second panel guests. So we have Andy and David. We'll have a quick intro slide for you guys. Maybe one more slide. Thanks. So thank you for joining me, David and Andy. If you can put microphone and camera on. So as a quick intro, and I could spend a lot more time on those 2 characters, and you've seen who they are on the screens already. So David, that you've already heard of, is the head of KSA FM Consulting based in Riyadh. Is also the CEO of an FM consulting company working mainly in the Middle East for the last 12 years, with over 15 years of FM consultancy under its belt in South Asia and the UK. Is also has over 30 years in the FM industry. That doesn't say your age at all, it's just pure experience. Yeah, it's a clue. But also, like myself and Andy and our colleague Mark, who couldn't join today, you are the co-author of the guide that we're launching today, which will be interesting to have your point of view on this. And then Andy is the director of FM at Manchester Central, which, if you're a fan of great concerts, you would have seen in the UK. He has directed the FM services in complex portfolio for different sites, both in public and private sector, with also over 30 years of experience. And he's a lead judge and mentor for the annual Iwfm Excellence Awards. So it'd be interesting also to have his point of view on what he's looking for on an award. So thank you for joining us both. And so maybe I can ask you the same that I asked the first group after the poll. What are those results surprising you?
After you, Andy. Go on.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here, Maud. Really loving the webinar. Not really. Looking at, I think, our industry, and it's also good to see that people are looking outside our industry now to benchmark customer experiences and the services within the FM industry. So I'd probably be a bit more interested to see why there's only 7 people who like your list, Maud, because I'm sure there's lots of tools on that list that people can take and use in their different organisations. So I'd suggest read the guide and look at Maud's list, because there's definitely tools on there people can use.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. David, same, similar view?
Yeah, yeah, similar. I think it's a slightly different in terms of the facilities management, and the workplace industry is focused very much on a completely younger suite of buildings, younger portfolios, generically in the Middle East, where I've been working for the last 13 years. And so therefore, as the buildings have shot up so quickly in such a relatively short space of time, there aren't many which would regard 40 years old in the UK as being ancient or first generation. But having looked after buildings like the Opera House in Covent Garden and in different churches and buildings where these things are hundreds of years old, in Western European countries, we're perhaps more used to looking after those, and therefore we've got a benchmark spread over a longer period of time. We can't forget that within the Middle East, there's a benchmark of good maintenance buildings last. Look at the pyramids, they've been around for several thousand years. They're fairly well looked after. So I think there's always a comparison, and as humans, I believe we do it instinctively.
No, I like the fact that benchmarking was on top. It's quite clear. Yeah.
It's the part that we looked after in particular, and that there are different grades of benchmarking and methodologies and efficiency, but sometimes the advent of technology provides that opportunity now to measure more accurately, more objectively, and therefore you can certainly influence your strategy far more effectively, I believe, than 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, this is clear that, looking at the panel expertise and what we've seen already with Jamie and Carly and that Paul, that people are still using almost pick and mix on different tools as well they might prefer. Looking maybe not just at the tools, but as maybe an award or, kind of on that certification, or trying to do the benchmark piece. And if I ask you, Wendy, as the judge for the Iwfm Award, what do you look for in an entry submission? What would be the ringing bell?
I think first and foremost, we're looking for that piece of innovation or best practice methodology across that category, and each one of the award categories has got some set criteria that is that the judges measure the quality of that award, and each judge is wanting to see quantifying data and benchmarking and showing that from cradle to grave, and the success that brings to that particular category. So ensuring you're doing that measurement and that benchmarking, to me, that's a vital piece that the judges are looking in any award submission.
I think this is a fair point, and I think this is where we see the importance of measuring. If you're trying to get an award or certification with your client, with your contract, I think this is almost the cherry on the top. When you do as you can within the day-to-day, but also manage to get that certification. What an achievement and for sure an accomplishment or satisfaction if we look into
Absolutely.
Measurement yourself. So for sure. David, you've already mentioned different kind of benchmarking and different things to look at when you're on different countries. So maybe I can look, because we have quite a lot of different audience actually today from different parts of the world. How does customer experience vary around the world?
I think it's quite significant, but one of the big differences that's come up, where we can now look at not just necessarily on Google Translate, but it's framing the questions so that you get an objective, unbiased response. Because in a multicultural, diverse country such as UAE and even within Saudi Arabia, going for a large expansion into the tourist and event management sector, in order to keep everybody happy, that's a real challenge. So whether it's the building as shown behind Andy, or you're talking about the experience that people have walking through Dubai Mall or Dhahran Mall, wherever it is in the world, everybody has a slightly different expectation. So how do you keep them happy? Indeed, are you keeping them happy? That's where the modern methods of communications. It's not dropping a little yellow token or an orange token into a box that you're given at a cashier's till as you go out of a supermarket and a smiley face. But in the countries in which I am based at the moment, they actually have ministers and directors and departments of happiness. So they're focused on making the entire country a happier place. And sometimes it's just the simplest of things. So the UAE just 2 weeks ago announced that it's now a paperless government in its entirety, that you can operate without paper. Well, that makes the sustainability chapter happy. It makes the environmentalists happy. And actually, people don't have to fill in forms. It's all done on mobile phones, which makes the telecom operators happy. So there are different ways by which you can promote the very methodology that you're asking the questions, which gives you the data back, the metadata to say, yeah, how many people said. So we're looking at the stats here. We've got about 158 people who are online at the moment. There was about double that number who originally registered, but many of them registered so they can get on the link and then they'll get the YouTube link afterwards, self-promoting our own event, and therefore they can look at it in their leisure after work hours or whatever. But the important thing, right to the survey that we have, and I'm promoting this with two heads on as a panelist and as partly delivering the webinar, is that there's a survey at the end where we want to know how we're doing, and you've got to be very open.
Yeah. We wouldn't do a good job if we weren't measuring our own satisfaction.
Oh, yeah.
So
Great job.
that was mandatory. Thank you for this. I think it makes sense as well. And when you already mentioned about the benchmarking is different depending on the country, almost improvement of buildings or how quickly they can be built is very relevant. And that's, I think, something we should look at when we look into a global portfolio as FM. Maybe if I ask one of our top questions, I think that's come up on the Q&A to you, Andy, what is your favorite customer experience measurement tools?
Well, that's a great question. I suppose not to sit on the fence. For me, it's getting the right tool that actually fits the right business organization. I've worked in various locations across various sectors, and for me currently, as you can see behind me, I run a convention center, so we've got a number of tools that fits different parts of our business methodology, from an NPS just to staff surveys to actually the one I prefer most, which is the mystery shopper, where the person comes from. But again, for me, it's when people are looking at this, they need to look at the best tool that fits all operations within the business and ensuring that tool meets the outputs that the business wants to get out of it. Yeah. That's the first thing. Don't just buy something off the shelf that you don't know what the output's going to be at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, for sure. I think we actually have Jamie from the panel number one that wanted to answer this question as well. Jamie, do you want to kind of come back on?
Yep, thanks. I agree with Andy. It comes down to what works for your market. I think the effort involved in working with a provider or a service, that's quite a key one. So customer effort score, I think, is worth thinking about. People want a service that's very effortless, very frictionless, very easy. So the ability to use the workplace to proceed through the estate in a very simple way, with requests being done effortlessly, that's really important. So I think that there's a mosaic of tools in our toolbox, but the effort piece and the effort score, I think that applies really well in the workplace. It should be easy for people to come to work, to be productive. If the workplace is their home, to have IT that supports it, it should be a breeze to be productive and happy in the workplace. So that for me, the effort score, I think, is a really key one.
The barriers is definitely something. And funnily enough, like you can see how I said that from the beginning of the webinar, is almost, the pandemic has not just shifted, but really accelerated. People are now so quick on doing it digital that even asking somebody, face to face is like, what? I don't have a chatbot ready. So no, it was great response, Jamie. Thank you. And thank you for the panelists that I've already answered. Time goes quick when you have fun. So I'll go to our last poll. So we make sure that we kind of get your feedback on what you've heard today. I know you've been very quickly briefed on what you will see on the guide. And as I mentioned, we also have already launched as a working group on Customer Experience Guide 1 around people. We would love to see if you already see the value of a guide such as what we're launching today and what we've launched on Group 1, but also what you've heard on the webinar, and if there's something else that we could do. So it'd be interesting to see what you guys are saying today, and making sure that the guide is not an end goal, and we kind of keep on updating the guide, adding hopefully all of the questions that we will have received today to it as a continuous improvement. And then once we have the results from this poll, we would love to kind of go into a Q&A. So very slowly, as the number of people are responding. I know this is a longer responses to check, by the way, so we give you another minute or two. But we would love to start to have a Q&A session. So thank you so much for already sending all of your questions throughout the webinar. And then we'll ask all of our panelists to come back on gently so they can help us to answer your question as much as we can. We'll have about 10 minutes to do that. So if we can look at the results maybe and see where we've done well, not so well, we should measure ourselves, aren't we? Well, I would say this is great. There's no surprise or not surprise, but great. I think this is what we're trying to achieve as a working group, and altogether what the Iwfm is trying to achieve, to bring you great value. So thank you so much. And if you didn't quite agree, thank you as well for saying this. I think we are working towards helping you as much as we can. So hopefully we can maybe add a couple of nuggets of knowledge with our questions. So if I can ask the panelists to come back on camera and with their microphone on, I'm sure we'll have some nice questions that have come up to this. How do I pick the questions? Or maybe David, if you see some.
Yeah, just go onto your chat.
Yep.
The Q&A.
So we have questions for Carly then. Carly, we have a question. Was that guest experience always the vision of Chiswick Park when it was first built 21 years ago, or has it evolved over time? And have your guests had an increase of productivity against the other sites?
Ooh, measurement and benchmarking.
Exactly,
benchmarking.
Double whammy here. So the park has been around for 21 years. We're really, really fortunate that the vision of the architects and developers were around creating a place where you can enjoy work. And if you enjoy work, you're ultimately more productive. So Stuart Lipton and Lord Richard Rogers, that was their overall vision. So when the park was first built, the image that you would have of a workplace when they thought of this 30 years ago would have been very, very different and not what you would expect to see. We have 33 acres of land with a lake and the 12 buildings in a horseshoe shape. So the vision back then was so far ahead of their time that it was about revolutionizing the enjoyment of work. If you enjoy it, you spend so much time there that you'll be more productive. And of course, that has evolved over the years, but the core essence has not changed. It's been making it more relevant. So where we are today, we're around creating an optimum workplace and optimum environment for our brands to succeed. And then what does that look like? Well, it's providing a fantastic environment. It's providing fantastic buildings with great BMS systems, smart technology, fantastic well-being environment with the airflow, the temperatures of the building,
on COVID,
exactly, as well as the outside as well. So although it has changed in terms of our areas of focus, the vision hasn't changed, but that gives us the challenge of making sure we keep ahead of the game the whole time as well.
That sort of continuous improvement as well. Yeah, brilliant.
Exactly.
Thank you, Carly. We have a question for Jamie. What methodology have you found the most effective for measuring the customer satisfaction of senior stakeholder within your client base?
I think as ever, it's a range of metrics. So NPS gets trotted out a lot. It's a good model. And the question, would you recommend this to your family and friends and colleagues? That came out of the retail world. But if you're asking somebody who's buying an outsourced service, it's a good question. but it's quite narrow though. It's really the so what. I mean, all these measures, if you get a really high score, you're excited. If you get a bad score, you're not. But it's a so what. So it's understanding what's driving it. And NPS tends to be a very end state score. The questions you ask before it that lead to it are around engagement and values and alignment and value for money and performance. So if you pin all your hopes on NPS, you could get a great number, but it's sort of last chance saloon. I think my experience is to put in place a mechanism where you're sampling continually people's feedback and views across a broad spectrum. Because the ultimate buyer, MD, who signs off the bid or buying your service, they're going to listen to the word on the street. So the end users, the building users, the customers, the FMs, all those people will have a view of the service that they'll hear. So a lead indicator, understanding the word on the street and how things are going, that's really powerful. Because if you're hanging all your oats onto one mechanism, that's quite risky. So for me, it's a framework model. NPS can be part of it, but measuring people's user experience, the flexibility, how well it aligns to their productivity, these are the building blocks that result in a good NPS. But if you can begin to put the lead indicators upstream, you can begin to respond to those challenges far more effectively.
I love that layering. I think this is also crucial. So I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jamie. Maybe if I look at another good question, actually, I would say maybe for David. In a world where we may be migrating to virtual experience or workplaces, what are you doing to keep the customer experience at the fore?
It's a test of budget and the mindset, as Jamie was just alluding to, of the senior stakeholders and the budget holders, I believe. Those people that get the vision and that they've worn a virtual reality mask or they've been to a Dolby wide view cinema, they get that impression, and after it you can't lose it because you've set yourself a standard. That's your benchmark. So there's a lot of education which this very webinar is partly designed to do, that people can look at it and say, oh, that's a good idea, I must try that myself, I've never done it before, I wonder how it works. But what I believe is the case in technology is where the advent of systems such as, for example, Dubai Mall, largest in the world, has in the order of any one stage about 35 to 40,000 visitors at any one time. And they rotate through about 3 times during a long day period. It's open until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And so on that basis, how can you compare the largest mall in the world with Blue Water, for example, in the UK? It's possible. So what you would now have is using artificial intelligence to actually track the number of people that are coming in, to do an accurate footfall count of how many people you have. If you then convert that into people per hour, and you then divide it by the number of square meters in that place, now you've got a benchmark. You can compare
realistic benchmark,
a realistic balanced one, because we're applying the same factor. So it's benchmarking teams tend to now focus on having technology, and because you're measuring it all the time, you can actually have a dashboard as chief executive of a major property developer, and you could be watching it saying, are you hitting your predictive scores today? No, why not? Oh, it's raining. Okay, so the immediacy of the metadata offers people to get an insight. Are we doing the right things? Okay, that controls the AC system, which makes the place more comfortable, less humid. All these different things come together. So that's why I see technology as offering much more than it used to be able to do.
Thank you, David. We'll have a cheeky little one for Andy, because we've mentioned return on investment before. I know this is the question that most of the FM will have because we are being asked by our clients. So, and the question is, how can we get the buy-in from the client during pandemic condition and hybrid method of working? And will they feel that the investment on improving the workplace experience, or the customer experience for that matter, is value for money? I know, Andy, you have fun on that one.
Wow, it's another tough question. I think the new norm, as we're starting to call it through the pandemic, I think it's brought challenges, especially in the service industry, for recruitment. And I think changing that workplace experience is what we as FM professionals need to do to entice people to come to work in these great workplaces and deliver great service. I think the benefits, I think all employers will see those benefits by the fact that the amount of time that, and we're doing it as we speak, we're spending a hell of a lot of time trying to entice people back to our venue by trying to give them a great work experience. But the challenge is people have changed. You know, that 2 years from working at home, changing their whole philosophy on life and taking different experiences. So we need to think outside the box. I think anyone who sits there and says, no, we're just going to go back to the status quo is living in a dream world. And we need to think out, and we need to look at our workspaces to actually give that work experience to actually our staff that then can hopefully pass it on. There is a return of investment in there, in the fact is it's time and money spent on trying to entice great people, because we all talk about our people being the biggest asset.
No, I like that. I think this is one of the crucial points as well we have to remember is, you know, if you can prove this by even just looking at the retention and attraction. So I couldn't agree, and I know Carly would do a similar example on her client retention. So how many business has stayed, so not just the employee. So I feel this is a very, very relevant point. So again, time goes quick. So I'll say thank you to all of the panels. I think it was a great session, and I know there's been a lot more questions on the Q&A, and we will make sure that we capture those and try to answer as much as we can later on. We really don't want to not answer. We think this is great, and that will also help on continuous improvement of our guide. So thank you so much, and I will pass it on to David to kind of wrap up.
Merci bien, Maud. I would ask all of the panelists to turn their microphones on, and for all those who are watching, of all our participants, to join in the virtual applause. Thank you very much to Carly and Jamie, and to my colleague Andy Kelly from the CEWG. In particular, so I'd like to thank Jeff Grately and LP Verkemer, who are behind the scenes working the numbers and giving us guidance. Also to Mark Ivans, who couldn't be here, unfortunately, with us today, but we wish him best in his circumstances. Personal thanks to Lucy Geeta and Nicole Luke of Iwfm Centre, and to Annie Horsley. Peter Brogan, who is the coordinator of the NTT series and overall producer of the series, thanks to him. All our fellow members of the CEWG, and in particular, not just subgroup 1 that set a benchmark, so I had to get that word in somehow, because we are not the only unicorns that are around trying to be something different. The handover of the baton, or in our case, by our code of Candy Floss, goes to Jeff Grately for subgroup 3. Their task is coming up, as I'll show you shortly, in terms of future events. And therefore, as we go through in terms of thanks and summary, for Wednesday, the 16th of March, that is not too far over the rainbow as it is now. That's at 12 o'clock on the Wednesday, as all the NTT tend to be. And their approach for group 3 is mapping the customer journey. And you can, as of today, download the part 2, measurement and benchmarking, from the website. The links are live, and you can pick them up on the PDF version, which will be available via the website. If you're interested in customer experience, there is a LinkedIn group now established, which is 126-09-444. It's not a free phone, that's the LinkedIn reference number for a group. And our illustrious leader, Jamie Mcdonald, is the lead on that. And if you're interested in all forms of customer experience and you actually want to join the CEWG, then have a look at that, see what it entails. And I'm sure Jamie will be willing to obviously taking any volunteers that want to follow on with that particular campaign. Other adverts, we just need to wrap up. The Insight Hub, this is Peter Brogan's particular baby. It contains all of the other GPGs, the guidance notes and more. That's at the website /insight. And then for podcasts, if you want to have something to listen to on the train, in the plane, or just when as a passenger in your car going to work, then the podcasts are great, and there's a new series from Sodexo. And the CPD number for those that are registered for that is 7522895. For those that are accruing their points like loyalty tags, and all of this will be available, as I said, the whole session has been recorded and will be available via YouTube. There is a survey, most important to us, please, in the last minute, if you could just finish that off, It gives us feedback as to how we did it as a team, but in particular also anything that you wish to add to that. The recording will go via YouTube, and special offers, an Academy offer ending 31st of January, 20% discount using the discount code discount22. So that's it. Thank you to you, one and all, for attending. It is now on the dot of our finishing time of 1300 GMT, 16 and 1700 in Saudi Arabia and Dubai. Stay safe and, for goodness sakes, enjoy today. Thank you very much and goodbye.